The stars burned faintly above a war-torn world, their gentle light trying to reach through a sky filled with smoke and ruin. The planet had once been green, a home to creatures who lived in harmony with its quiet oceans and silver forests. Now it was scarred with black craters, fallen ships, and the echoes of a long, terrible war. Among the silent wreckage walked a human soldier named Daniel. His armor was scratched, his rifle worn, and his heart heavier than his gear. He had been stranded for 3 days after his platoon was wiped out during an ambush. His radio was dead, his supplies nearly gone, and his only goal was to survive until rescue arrived. But survival wasn't the only thing keeping him moving. He had heard something. A faint cry carried through the smoke, almost like a whisper. It was not human, yet it was full of fear, the kind only a child could make when calling for help. He followed that sound through the burned forest until he found the source, a small alien girl, no older than 10 in human years, trapped under the remains of a fallen transport craft. Her skin shimmered faintly, a shade between pale gold and pearl, her large eyes glowing with faint light. Her breathing was weak. Daniel dropped his weapon and rushed to her side, pushing aside the twisted metal with his bare hands. When the debris finally moved, she looked up at him, afraid but hopeful. Hey, you're all right now," Daniel said softly, even though he knew she couldn't understand his words. Still, something in his tone calmed her. She reached out with trembling fingers and touched his armored hand, her voice weak as she spoke something in her language. Daniel didn't understand the words, but he could feel what she meant. She was thanking him. He lifted her carefully, wrapping her in his tattered cloak. She weighed almost nothing, but the way she clung to him made her feel heavier than his whole world. He looked around the ruins. There was no one else alive. Whoever had been with her was gone. He began to walk. Every step was slow and painful. His armor beeped warnings about low oxygen. His water supply was down to a few sips. Yet he didn't stop. The child needed help, and something deep inside him refused to let her die. When night came, he found shelter under the wing of a crashed ship. He built a small fire from broken parts and sat near it, holding the child close. She kept whispering something, one word, over and over. It sounded like Lyra. He guessed it might be her name. Lyra, he repeated gently. Her eyes brightened a little. She smiled faintly and whispered it again, this time pointing to herself. "Okay, Lyra," he said. "We'll get you home." The next morning, Daniel searched for any sign of communication equipment. He climbed up a ridge overlooking the battlefield and found the remains of a beacon tower. With some work, he could send a short signal. But he also knew that activating it might attract enemies, the alien forces who had been fighting humans for years. He hesitated, looking at Lyra sleeping peacefully beside him. Then he sighed and started fixing the beacon. Hours passed. When he finally powered it up, the signal went through. A weak pulse echoed across the planet's horizon. Daniel didn't know who would receive it, human or alien, but at that moment he didn't care. Someone needed to find this child. Not long after, he heard the sound of engines in the distance. He stood up, holding Lyra close, and watched as a dark shape descended through the clouds. It wasn't a human ship. The alien markings were clear, glowing faintly blue. He raised his weapon but lowered it again. This wasn't a time for fighting. When the ship landed, soldiers in elegant silver armor stepped out, their movements cautious. At their center stood a tall figure, the alien queen herself, ruler of her people, her face hidden by a translucent veil that shimmered like mist. Daniel's heart pounded. He had seen her image before in war briefings, a symbol of fear and power. But here she was, looking not like a conqueror but a mother desperate for something. Her glowing eyes scanned the ruins until they fell on the child in his arms. The world seemed to stop. The queen took one step forward, then another. Her lips trembled as she whispered something, a word full of emotion. Lyra opened her eyes and looked up. When she saw the queen, her face lit with joy. "Mom," she cried in her soft voice, struggling to get out of Daniel's arms. Daniel gently set her down. Lyra ran forward on shaky legs, tears streaming down her face. The queen rushed to her, kneeling as she caught her daughter in her arms. The two clung to each other, their voices echoing softly in the quiet air. Even without understanding their language, Daniel could feel the power of that moment. The sound of a mother's sob and a child's laughter blended into something that reached deeper than words. The alien soldiers lowered their weapons. The war, at least for that moment, was forgotten. The Queen looked up at Daniel. Her eyes shimmered with tears. She said something to her guards, and they stepped aside. She walked toward Daniel slowly, carrying Lyra. When she stopped in front of him, Daniel stood straight, unsure of what to do. He expected anger, suspicion, but instead the Queen bowed her head. A sign of respect. She spoke softly, her voice melodic yet trembling with gratitude. He didn't understand the words, but Lyra translated in broken English, a language she had learned a little from human broadcasts before the war. She says, "Thank you. You saved me. You save her heart." Daniel swallowed hard, feeling his throat tighten. "Just doing what anyone should," he said quietly. Lyra looked at him, her bright eyes full of emotion. "Not anyone," she said. "Only you." The Queen reached out and touched the emblem on his armor, a small patch showing his unit, now long gone. She placed her other hand on her heart, then on Lyra's. It was a gesture of connection. Daniel understood enough. She was saying he would always be part of their story. A moment later, the Queen ordered her guards to bring forward a small metallic sphere. She pressed it into Daniel's hand. It glowed faintly. Lyra explained, "It mean peace. She give you sign of peace." Daniel looked at it, speechless. The tiny sphere carried a soft hum like a heartbeat. It wasn't just a gift, it was a promise. Then, as the alien ship prepared to leave, Lyra hugged him tightly one last time. "I not forget," she whispered. "I tell all human good." Daniel knelt and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "Stay safe, little one." When the ship lifted off, the wind rushed through the ruins, carrying dust and tears together. Daniel watched until it disappeared into the clouds. For the first time in a long while, he smiled. He had seen war destroy everything, but he had also seen something stronger: compassion. Days later, human rescue arrived. Daniel was taken back to his base, treated for injuries, and questioned about what had happened. The officers didn't believe his story at first. "You're saying the Queen herself was there?" they asked. Daniel only nodded. He showed them the small glowing sphere. When they scanned it, they found it was transmitting a faint pulse, a peace signal on the frequency both sides had long abandoned. That pulse changed everything. Within months, the two species began secret talks. The first ceasefire in decades started because of one soldier, one child, and one mother's tears. Years passed. The war ended. Trade and travel began between humans and the alien race. Daniel retired, living quietly near the coast. He never sought fame or medals. To him, the only reward he needed was knowing that one small act of kindness had saved a life, and perhaps an entire galaxy from endless war. One morning, as he sat by the sea watching the waves, a small shadow appeared beside him. He turned and saw a young woman, her golden skin glowing faintly in the sunlight. Her eyes, still bright as starlight, met his with a gentle smile. "Lyra," Daniel whispered, hardly believing it. She laughed softly, the same laugh he remembered. "Mom say you live here," she said. "I come to see you." He stood up, smiling. "You've grown," she nodded. "I learn much. You saved me. You saved my people. I never forget." She handed him a small flower that shimmered with blue light. "From my home," she said. "Mom say it grow where hope live." Daniel took it carefully, his hands trembling. "Tell your mother I'm glad she got her daughter back." Lyra smiled. "She say, 'Mom, I'm back. He saved me.'" Daniel felt tears well up in his eyes. He turned to look at the sea, the sunlight dancing over the waves. "Tell her I said, thank you for believing a human could do good." Lyra nodded. "We both know. Good hearts same everywhere." They stood in silence for a while, watching the horizon where the blue sky met the silver sea. For Daniel, that moment meant everything. He had fought through darkness, but he had also found light, not in weapons, not in victory, but in the simple act of helping someone who wasn't even human. When Lyra finally left, she looked back one last time and waved. He waved back, holding the glowing flower close to his chest. As her small ship vanished into the clouds, Daniel whispered softly, "Goodbye, kid." The waves crashed gently against the shore, carrying his words across the wind. Somewhere beyond the stars, in a palace of silver and light, the alien queen stood by her window, looking at the same stars, holding her daughter's hand. A single tear rolled down her face, and not from sorrow, but from peace. For the first time in 1,000 years, The galaxy knew what it felt like to be united, not by power, not by fear, but by the kindness of one human heart. And on that quiet world by the sea, a soldier sat under the fading sun, smiling as he whispered once more, "Mom, I'm back. He saved me."